Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the Payoff, Hannah Sward is an amazing story. She's more than 12 years sober. She had more than a decade of hardcore crystal meth use. And prior to that use, she was an escort. She was a stripper. Her book is called Strip, and it chronicles her road to recovery, and it was a long and rocky one. This conversation is near and dear to my heart already. It was long, but it was based on recovery. We talk a lot of recovery because she speaks the same language as I do, and hopefully the same language as you do right now. Or maybe if you need help or you know somebody that needs help, this can open your eyes. Hannah is informing, and she's entertaining, and she's way cool. But first, Kevin Souza. First thing I want to ask you, how many meetings are you getting to? Because I need to, by the way, because I'm thinking I need a meeting. So I was like, I'm just going to be an alcoholic and tell her.
Yeah. Well, I love the way you just jump right in, because that's what we do, right? Like, let's get to it. I'm someone that I need a lot of meetings in order to kind of be on level or somewhere near there. So I have 3 anchor meetings that I go to, like 3 core meetings, and then I get to another couple meetings that I kind of float around in. That's not true. I have 4 anchor meetings, and then the other 2, I'm also in another program. So, yeah.
Are you cool to say what the other program is?
Of course, it's Al-Anon.
Oh, okay, yeah. I could use that too. I'm from a family of alcoholics. Both my brothers are sober. One of them lives out by you in Hermosa.
Okay.
And my other brother lives in Philadelphia, and they're both. I tell people it's the last club on earth we wanted to join, but here we are.
Here we are. Wow. Oh, so and where are you? I wasn't clear.
I'm in Texas. I'm in Waco, so I'm right between Dallas and Austin. I've been here for about 6 years.
Nicest people in Texas, I always think.
They really are nice. Yeah, I like it, and it's like one of those things where I got here, and I'm not sure if I'm ever going to leave. I like it more than I thought I would.
Yeah. That's a good feeling.
Well, the biggest thing is, and see if you can relate, I traveled around a lot for work. I still do. And the first place I went when I moved here, because I'm a big grown man, my mom helped me move, right? So my mom was like detailing my apartment, and the first thing I did was I said, I'm going to a meeting. And I went to a meeting, and that's been my home group for the past coming up on 6 years. And it's like being an alcoholic is pretty cool like that. I felt like you can plug right in.
So cool. I feel so fortunate. I mean, with the book tour, I was able to get to meetings and wherever and whenever. And all of a sudden you have these people that are in your life and you could go, anywhere. Yeah.
Okay. So the book is called Strip, and it's unbelievable. I mean, I haven't read the whole thing, but I've gone through it, and I cannot believe that you are able to, and I really can't believe this because I don't know what it's like. I mentioned you're able to access some of these difficult topics and go through them. And I heard you say that you couldn't actually write about some of the stuff, like some of the sex work, some of the meth and the stripping in your first couple drafts. It took you a little bit, and I love how you say you had to get further into recovery to get there.
Well, wow. First, just thank you so much for, you're clearly prepared. No one's ever really brought that up in a podcast that, with that knowledge. Yes, it definitely did. It took me a long time to write the book because it really was a journey with my recovery. And the sex scenes, I couldn't have done it sooner. I needed enough recovery, outside therapy, to come to a place in myself where I could go there and have the tools to anchor myself, to bring myself in, bring myself out, and have a new experience with it, while also trying to bring in the reader. And it was very intentional. And I know in the earlier drafts, like I had an agent and he had said, you just gloss right over the sex. He said, and we had sex. And I'm like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
It's like, we need a little more. Take us into the hotel room, take us into, take us in bed. Take us to bed.
Yeah, I even, when you say that, take a deep breath, because it's just heavy. It's just heavy stuff. In your childhood, you grow up and it's not only heavy, it's kind of empty. Your mom is not there. I've heard you say, you felt like you were in the crib just reaching up and nothing was there. You weren't able to establish contact with anything. Describe a little bit what it was like. You grew up in a bohemian lifestyle, but it was also somewhat empty as far as an emotional standpoint and parents are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a colorful childhood. It was empty in the sense of, that description of being a baby and reaching out and nothing like to hold on to really encompasses it, because it was like there was just no stability, which, I think a lot of people can identify with that in different ways, hopefully the feeling. For me, that looked a lot like, I had, my father his first love was poetry. It was everything. And it was what I loved about him most. And it was also one of the challenges, because he was always elsewhere. Right. And to have a parent that is elsewhere, especially when it's your primary parent. And also he really loved women. He loved getting married and moving around. And
he's married. This is a guy who's married like 5 times, right? Okay.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
You are.
Come on, guy.
Very impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 times, and a number of girlfriends along the way. And yeah, we grew up. I grew up at one point on an island that had no cars or stores. And the house that we moved into was, like a little cottage, had a furnace in there, but like a swing that if you swung in it, you just hit the furnace. And it had a bathtub in the kitchen, and then it had an outhouse inside the house. So I remember when the editors, emailed and said, the wording's wrong here, that an outhouse is supposed to be outside the house. And I'm like, well, for the sake of the reader, we can do that, but but it was inside the house. He's like, well, that's too confusing. I said, okay. And then we moved to the States from the Algonquin Island to a commune up in the Santa Cruz Mountains with the guru. And I went to school there for a while in a high school of 11. I think there were 11 of us in the high school.
In Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Wow. So Santa Cruz is sort of like it's like more of a hippie area, I guess you would say. And
yes,
did you experience some of that as a kid, like seeing your dad go through those sorts of experiences?
Yeah, my dad was definitely a hippie. Definitely, he was very much into gurus and going to India, and meditation was a really big part of my childhood, and yoga. And I remember I had a meditation pillow, and he had meditation retreats at the house. And I remember one time we were with a guru by the name of Baba Muktananda, and that it was a big hall, right? A big meditation hall. And the microphone was being passed around. I was maybe 6, 7. And, people were asking questions like, what's the nature of being? Why are we here? The nature of happiness. And I just remember wanting to grab that microphone. Can I swear?
Sure.
And just wanted to say, fuck you, to the whole thing. I had an aversion to it. So getting sober, that was a hurdle, the meditation aspect.
It's interesting you mentioned it. I've always thought, I've gone through so many phases in my life with drugs, right? Like, so whatever drug I was on, it was a hippie. I was into all techno or whatever when I was doing ecstasy, like whatever. But, and I always thought I romanticized about hippies, but getting sober this is my experience. Hippies may be cool as shit, but not the best parents.
Yeah.
And so, and it seems like you had that part of your childhood. And I'm going to say this, I know you can go here because that's what you're doing in the book and talking to me, but I just got to say, it's tough for me to ask you these questions because I know it's it's just a tough topic, and I'm not terribly well versed on asking these kind of questions, but you're 6 years old and you get abducted at a park and you get raped. And is that in Santa Cruz?
That was in Victoria, British Columbia,
okay.
Which is, known as like this picturesque, place with flowers, and it is.
Yeah.
And, kind of an unlikely place, but these things, there's no time or place that they don't happen.
Yeah. And you said that your mother, or I guess at the time, your stepmom, she was upset with you because I guess the police took you home and they said, hey, we got to find this guy. And she was like, what's the deal?
Yeah, she was. And I've tried to actually talk about it with her since, like maybe 10 years ago. In any case, yes, I was 6 and I was alone at the park. And it was a different time then. I think kids could go, maybe not off to a park.
Yeah, but I would leave the house and we would just go off. And my parents we had this bell outside our house and they would ring the bell and we would come home. I mean, and I'm not, from Civil War times, I'm not that old, but that's how it was. This is the mid 80s, mid to late 80s, that's what's going down.
Yeah. I love that, a bell. Yeah.
I haven't thought about that in a while, yeah. But you're doing your thing and you're able to walk off and unfortunately, beyond unfortunately, you get swiped by this person and he commits these sex acts and, how did that, I can't even imagine that experience, but what happens after that, the aftermath? You go to try to find the guy and like you said, your stepmom's not happy.
Yeah. Well, he told me over and over that if I ever told anyone that he would kill me. So, however, I was dropped back off at the park at some point and the neighbors actually found me. I think they brought me to the police station and we did drive around looking for the person, and my stepmom met us there. She was in art school at the time. So, and she must have been in art class. And she was very upset with me. And I think I really internalized that as I did something wrong, right? Like I got in that man's car. I did something wrong. The shame that it was my fault. So I think the whole processing of it too was another whole thing. We're not processing. And I just don't have a memory of my father being there. I always remember him as being in India at the time. And I started having nightmares. And I think it was too at a time when there wasn't as much awareness. There certainly wasn't anything like Amber Alert or, even though it was the hippies and, I'm sure, therapy and stuff, it was just that consciousness was very different then. But I did start having nightmares, and all I remember is being taken out of school and being brought to the hospital and having being told to go to sleep and having a sticky stuff and wires out of my head. And then at some point the nightmare stopped. So I thought it must have been the glue and the wires that stopped the nightmares. So
it's funny, and we're talking about, obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm no expert, I have my experience, but what I'm hearing is somebody going through some hardcore trauma, and then the age you and I grew up in, we're around the same age, you didn't really talk about whatever was happening. So you're not talking about it, you're having outbursts, And then
Yeah.
for me, you know, you feel like an outsider. I mean, I had things that made me feel like an outsider, like learning disabilities or whatever. They'd send me to like the reading van to go. I just felt like I wasn't a part of, you know?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like those things kind of can mount up. And then, I mean, nothing compared to what you went through, but it's all relative, right? You feel outside. And that's the addict part too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that you said that. Not like, 'cause I would do that, just what you said. I'd be like, but other kids had it worse. Other kids were locked in a closet or a basement and they were, you know, beaten or like, and I would really, that was, I guess, one of my coping mechanisms up until not too many years ago of not sitting with it, not dealing with it.
And you kind of, you have another experience with sexual trauma.
Yeah.
As I guess, what happened the second time when you were young? You were still around the same age.
I was at 9 at that point, still in Victoria, and I had a boy babysitter. And I had a little brother at that point, a 2-year-old brother, who I just, you know, I loved being a sister, an older sister. And so this babysitter would babysit us, and he would have me play games. And I just remember being really fearful that something would happen to my little brother, of course, to myself as well, and telling my parents that I just don't like this babysitter. And not being heard because he kept coming back until he moved away. And that's something I hear often in recovery, right? Is that, or I'll speak for myself, is not having a voice. And so that's a whole other aspect of it, right? Like how finding our voice, finding my voice, and when it's been squashed down before. I mean, not.
Well, then you find your voice. You speak up, and in recovery, at least, it feels good. And then you get filled up with the ability to cut through those nerves and having faith, and then you have the ability to speak up again and again, you know, like, and that's for me, like, it's like, I've built self-esteem by still am. I want to say such a people, am a people pleaser.
Oh my God.
Right. I mean, that's just, I was talking to my sponsor about that last week. I was like, how do I stop doing this? You know, and he was like, well, you're just not a finished product. You have to, I had to call somebody and tell them that I was unable to go through with a commitment because something had come up, something totally legitimate. And my sponsor said, whatever you do, when you talk to them and tell them that you canceled, don't say like you'll do whatever else you can to make up for it. And so I was like, yeah, you know, I can't do it, but whatever you need, you know, I'll do this and that. And it was like, I couldn't do it. I could not, it was hard enough to pick up the phone and get out of it, but I couldn't. Right. Yeah.
See, I just love that. I mean, especially coming from a man, I don't hear as much talk of that. And I just love that. I mean, not love that you experience that because it's tough stuff, you know? Yeah. And I mean, I'm right there with you. I talk with the sponsee often about this, and it's been one of the most helpful things is getting to take another woman right through that process, and then and say, you know, my experience with that and how I've been able to find my voice and use it, and specifically with the people pleasing. And I would say to her, you know, like for me, it still feels like it when I speak up for myself, when I say I can't do, or I'm not able to do that, and not even given a reason, I feel like sending a bouquet of flowers. Yeah. Like, you know, like, it's like impossible. But I'm so sorry. You know?
Yes. Yeah. What the hell is wrong with us? You know, I guess we're just going through it, and we're not, and literally, like my sponsor told me, and like, you know, I kind of hearing you, we're not finished products, and that's okay, because we're talking to people about what we're doing, and you know, we're sharing these experiences like I am with you here. Now, we talked about your trauma, and that kind of sets the table for lack of a better term, your addiction and your use, which doesn't really, it's sort of like a slow burn.
Yeah. You
end up, now, do you have any alcoholism or drug addiction in your family?
My half sister is also in the program.
Oh, you talk a ton about her. She's like your soulmate almost, right?
She's actually, since my father was married 5 times, I have 6 other brothers and sisters.
Okay. So this is a different one.
Yeah, this is a different one.
Okay.
And I focus on my other sister because it became too many characters in the book.
Yeah.
It was like, well, I didn't want to write like a 500-page novel or book.
So you got a little bit going on in the bloodstream, possibly.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I found out, as I think many of us do, like the more I kind of dig.
For sure.
I'm like, my grandma.
Yeah.
Like pills apparently, kind of. And, I'm certainly think like in another form, my mom had perhaps a sex and love addiction. Yeah. And
filling that hole with whatever. It's funny you mentioned that we discover the stuff. It's not usually our family doesn't lead with that. It's not a headline that we have. Here's your whatever addicted person X, Y, and Z. My mom eventually did. When we started to drink a lot, she would share with us, "Hey, your father and his family, they've got this thing going on, and you guys need to watch it." But it was kind of I learned the more I got sober, the more I learned about it. Now with you said I guess I learned the first time you did acid, you were like 17 or 18. And it was to impress. It was to impress a guy.
It was in high school, probably 16, in guitar class, and he wanted to drop acid, and I had never done that before, and I thought, well, okay, that'll look really cool, and that will impress him, and it didn't. He chose my best friend instead. Well, that was a waste, and I didn't get a good grade.
Well, how about drinking? Were you drinking during these like formative years? And I know it becomes a big part of your story down the line, but early on, I didn't hear you mention it too much.
Yeah, I didn't. It's funny to think when I think of, I'll never consider myself a good student, but I always forget, it was important for me to be in the girls' honor society and things like that, because I wanted to get good grades and that route, because my father was an intellectual and was a professor, and it was that was something there about doing well in school. I remember one time getting drunk in high school. It was at a party, and all I remember is that red cheap wine out of the carton and not being able to stop and ending up in the restroom and just not getting sick with that, red wine everywhere. So there was that binge quality. There was the binge quality. I wouldn't even call it quality. I binged right from the get-go. However, drinking wasn't a thing until I was 36.
But then this is after almost a decade, right, of using crystal meth.
Yeah.
And so after high school, do you go right to California? What do you do after, or do you go to Chicago?
I was really homesick for Canada, so I graduated high school early, which wasn't too hard to do because the school here's were a lot easier. And I went straight back to Toronto, and I spent some time there. And then I wanted to go back to school, so I went to Montreal to study religion, of all things. And I didn't realize it was a religious department. I thought I wanted to study religion, not be religious.
Yeah, you wanted to study theology, not become a nun. Yeah,
I was like, oh, what, huh? So, and I was just really lost there. And I just remember walking the streets at night. I was so lost, Pete, just completely bewildered. I had this fantasy of learning French, being a French girl, and just leading this interesting life. And I just remember I had this little apartment, and all these little cockroaches would come out at night, and I would leave and just walk the streets looking for Leonard Cohen, because I had that, schoolgirl crush on Leonard Cohen. And, I'm not sure why I thought I would run into him in the middle of the night.
He was in Montreal though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or at least I thought he was, maybe.
Well, so that situation is playing out. And again, it goes back to, and whether you have it in your bloodstream or whether you have trauma or you have that like emptiness, right? Like, no mom around when you were younger. There's something going on here. And then you go from Montreal and then I guess you kind of reunite with your sister at some point, who was like your best friend, and you felt like when you and her were together, you'd be great. Yeah.
Well, I would spend summers every summer with my mom, although I don't remember her around particularly. She was, like I said, really into her men and her own thing. However, my little sister and I we tried to glue our hands together. And when I would leave to go back to Canada every summer, at the end of the summer, she would grab onto my ankle and just scream as if I was like leaving to go to war or something. And so our plan was always that as soon as we graduated high school, there's a 3-year difference between us, we would meet in LA. That was always our plan. And so I had a few years, because I'm her older sister, to kind of wait for her. So from Montreal, I called my mom from a phone booth one day. And I mean, young people kind of know what a phone booth is, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
An outdoor phone in a box.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the middle of winter in Montreal, right? Yeah. It's freezing. And I called my mom and I'm crying, because one thing she was good in coming through in emergencies. And I told her, I'm not going to class. Like, I'm just, my boyfriend had gone to Hawaii, or kind of my kind of boyfriend at the time. And she's like, well, come to Florida. I said, I can't, because Harry just bought me a fridge and I can't leave the fridge. And she said, fuck the fridge. I'm sending you a ticket. You're coming back to Florida tomorrow. So I left everything and I went to Florida.
Welcome to One Star Rewind, a new podcast about those dreaded one-star reviews that every business owner hates to receive, but yet every customer loves to read. During this podcast, we will peel back that one-star review to better understand how it happened, when it happened, and what the business owner is doing after receiving that one-star review. This podcast will be about love, hate, and laughter. On One Star Rewind, we will meet with real business owners who will tell their stories and how they do rely on reviews for their business. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or download us at roguemedianetwork.com. Please subscribe, but only rate and review for not a one-star review. Join us each time for a new review and a new story.
Bros and foes and heroes. Gonna tell you about bros and foes and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Mike.
And we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the two of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros, Foes, Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Bros and foes and heroes.
What are we doing here, Rusty? What are we going to do?
Yep, we're doing the King of the Hill Rewatch podcast.
King of the Hill Rewatch podcast. Yeah, so we're going to go through one episode at a time. Come along for the ride with us.
Come check it out.
And give me a good like Dale Gribble quote to go out on. Wingo.
Yeah, Wingo.
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 All right. Well, join us for the King of the Hill rewatch podcast.
Deep in the heart of Texas, that drinks his brew.
911, what's your emergency?
Do you hear that? It's coming from the house.
It's coming from inside the house? Do you mean? Could it be?
The Poltergeist. New from Rogue Media. Two haunted hotties talking about haunted places. Every episode, we dive deep into the darkest places and give you a bit of history.
We're getting spooky in all the right places.
You've gobbled your last ghoul.
Follow along for the craziest and spookiest stories with Debbie's Dark Tourism. The Stanley Hotel,
Winchester House,
The Alamo,
Hotel Monte Vista,
and more spooky places. Find us at _Poltergals. POLTERGALS.
Look over your shoulder. It's us,
The Poltergals. Wherever you consume the podcast, you can find us there.
Your mom, by the way, was pretty. Look, she seems like she was empowered. I mean, she would talk about relationships with men. I think it's worth noting. I mean, there's a year where she had sex with 100 men. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't really give a fuck. It sounds like.
No,
Yeah.
no, she didn't. She would tell me like, "Oh yeah, that was a great year." It was, I was not supposed to say his name, but some baseball player, and she's like, and his friend, you know.
Oh, I'm dying to know the name. I know you can't say it, but I'm dying.
I'll tell you after.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you'll have to tell me. So you go to Florida, and then I know you start ending up in the sex industry when you get to Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that story is great. I mean, it's not great, but I can so relate as, I don't know whether it's, I have certain things that I like to do and that I'm good at. There's a lot of stuff I'm terrible at. And there's also even like some of like the jobs people will call remedial. Like I got a job at KFC when I was in a halfway house and I was terrible at that. I mean, I got better, but you talk about you're working at a place that's kind of like a 24-hour fitness and you're like, fuck this.
Yeah.
You had to be there at 6 a.m. and you were like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I ended up in Chicago for a period of time. My friend was filming a movie there and we were both like, she's like, I'm really lonely and I'm in this huge apartment, and I was like, well, I'll come, So I thought, okay, I have a, I got a job at 24 Fitness and it was like that, blue spandex and that like white polyester shirt buttoned up and it was like some 5 a.m. shift and I get there and I'm standing there in that outfit and I'm like, well, I think I lasted like 3 hours and I'm like, I just can't do this. Like, I can't do this. I can't stand here in this spandex and get paid minimum wage. How am I going to, I can't make money for college this way. And just went home. And I just remember looking through the Chicago Tribune and eating a can of tuna and looking in the classified section for other jobs. And I saw an ad that said make $300 an hour. And I remember throwing the can of tuna out, getting another can, sitting back down. I'm not sure why the tuna stands out, but I remember the tuna with the Chicago Tribune and the ad, and it said, and I called the number. And I think it was that night that I took the train out to some strange part of Chicago and met a man at an Italian restaurant and we talked about, I don't remember what we talked about, but he had garlic bread and I started working for him. Yeah.
And that really kicks off. See, because your life's been chaos, from what I can tell up until this point. But now, like, you're actively involved in the chaos per se. Like, and you talk about this. You didn't. A lot of people are like, "Hey, I got into stripping or being an escort because I was on drugs. Like, that's not your story.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was doing a panel a number of months ago in Chicago. It was really interesting. And one of the audience members asked that. He's like, well, you were fueled by your drugs to be in that industry. And there was no point where that was the case. And I'd like to blame it on that. Like, oh, I was high and drunk, but I wasn't. I was very sober. I mean, sober, not emotionally sober, but physically.
Well, clearly,
except for one time doing coke with a couple.
Did you like it?
No, I didn't. It was my first time ever doing coke. I was 19, was Chicago. I was called to go see this couple, and they had like satin sheets and the coke. I mean, just like straight out of a movie.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm getting like a big smile. Yeah.
Yeah, like probably lavender, satin, that whole.
Yeah.
It was terrible. It was just terrible. I remember going back to the apartment where I lived with my friend, and it was right downtown, and it was like one of those really high rise. It was 20-foot floor, and I wanted to jump out. That's all I remember about it. I wanted to jump out the window.
So we're talking about like higher end clientele. I mean, pretty much for the most part, when you're doing this, that's what I gleaned from your book.
That I wish that were the case.
Okay.
Once I got to LA, it was, but in Chicago, my standards. I mean, it was like a dumpy apartment where I would go, to work, and was like this velour zebra, like and like an aqua couch the girls and I would sit on, eating bologna sandwiches, waiting for like, to fit some man's description. And I think it was, I mean, I don't know if that's a lot at that time, but I don't think so. I mean, it felt like a lot to me versus minimum wage, but I think it was like $200 or $300 an hour.
Okay.
And then, let's say the pimp, it didn't really feel like a pimp, but that was what it was, get some of it, and the driver gets some of it. So,
it's like Uncle Sam, once he's done with you, it's like, hey, it's not everything I thought. Right.
Yeah. And I wasn't a savvy call girl. I mean, I had no game, right? Like I was terrible at it. Like the first man I ever the first man I ever went to, I think he wanted me to talk dirty to him. And, I'm 19, I'm standing there, and Mr. Sam is like, you need to look like you've been doing this a while. And I'm like, okay. And the guy wants me to talk dirty to him, and I just freeze up. Like, I just can't. I'm just I can't get the words out. I got better later, but and he's like, you need to go with a higher class service, and he named some famous people that he could connect me with, and I just didn't. I didn't even jump on that. Instead, we went for donuts. Like, he's like, let's go out for donuts.
So he was a good guy.
Okay. Yeah, he was a good guy. I mean, he never called for me again, which was fine. But we went out for donuts. He paid, and he said, you need to be with a different, agency.
So you're going through all this, and then you're not using drugs. I mean, aside from the occasional, you mentioned doing coke, and then this only lasts for a couple months, and then I guess you kind of reunite with your sister, and you guys end up stripping together. In California, because you want to be you get in that world, right? You want to be actors, and then what happens?
Yeah, we I moved to LA when I was 24, and she was 21, and it took me a little while to get here because I had some detours along the way. And when I got here, I had no money. I'm hesitant to say I had no money because a lot of people have no money and they don't choose to go work for Madame Ava, right? So it's like, I don't want to blame it on that. And that's not my intention. That is the path I chose. Like I went back to prostitution as soon as I came back to LA. I worked for Madame Ava for a little while. And then I stepped up and I started stripping with my sister. So it was like a step up because it was, I was no longer selling myself in that particular way.
And when you guys start to strip and then you start to do meth, Is that your first experience where the woman says, you know, you do meth and to lose weight?
Yeah. Wow, you are really.
And it didn't take.
This is unusual. You are good.
Yeah. And
You're good, Pete.
Well, it didn't take, right? You do the meth for 30 days. It's like we say in the rooms, we'll give you 30 days and refund your misery. Well, you do it for 30 days. You don't lose any weight and you say, forget about it.
Yeah. We don't. I mean, I had no clue because we were in bad moods. We were clumsy on stage. We didn't lose weight.
Yeah.
And however, I will never forget that first time crushing those lines on the Formica table in our black kitchen. Like the yellow Formica, crushing those lines. And I just remember telling my sister, you go make the beds. I'll be in charge of this. And she's like, fine. And it didn't have the same effect on her. But even before I ever did my first line of meth, that ritual, I was all in.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like you see, like there's a control aspect. You're into the ritual because it's just like such an environment. Your sister's, I guess, not an addict, right? So she can kind of whatever. I mean, she goes through binges and benders, but we're a different breed.
Yeah. And the poor thing didn't become one of us.
Yeah. And you do this for poor thing. When you do this for, you know, about a month stretch, and then you kind of get back out there and you end up escorting again. Like and it's like extremely high clientele now, right?
Yeah, at that point it is high clientele. I still wasn't particularly savvy, but it was.
Yeah.
I was going to the peninsula for people who are not in LA. It's comparable to like, you know, Beverly Hills Hotel, Beverly Hills, Hotel, you know, in Bel Air. Definitely higher clientele. And enough so that, you know, you need to, Madame Ava lent me some money to go get a nice black suit. You know, no more, like in Chicago, I was wearing, you know, $10 cotton, bright purple mini dresses, you know, that hardly covered myself.
Yeah.
And that was definitely not, you need to be in a crisp pencil suit.
Would you go out with these guys? Like go to like big events and stuff like that?
No, it was always, I mean, some of them wanted to. The hardest part would be the talking and would be going out. So I just couldn't do it. And it's like, I couldn't fake the talk.
Yeah.
I couldn't fake the talk, but I could bend over. I mean,
I get it. Well, it's sometimes the talk is more exhausting. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes, but when you're, I would imagine that makes it just more real. Like I'm so disconnected to this person right now, you know, it kind of almost punctuates, you know, exactly what's going on. Yeah.
Just like with stripping, I mean, it's rare, or at least in my experience, to have to talk to any stripper that I had worked with, where the worst part was when the men wanted to talk.
Yeah. You said some of the guys were shitty guys. Some of the guys were good guys, like you mentioned. The one thing that jumps out at me, and you said you're watching the Oscars once, and a guy who you'd been involved with who wasn't so cool was up there getting an award, and you're like, wow. And you said that was a real, like your stomach almost turned over.
Yeah, even as you say it right now, I feel sick. I mean, that's odd to still have that feeling, but it was like he was not a savory character, and that was in probably one of the most upscale hotels. And he did not pay. I wasn't good at getting in and counting the money up front. I was embarrassed to kind of count the money, which is insane. I mean, you don't go to 7-Eleven and get a hot dog and so you're giving yourself over, and I'm not counting the money.
Yeah. I get it. I mean, I just like, it's one of those things where you just kind of want to act like it didn't happen or whatever. I could see why that would go down. Plus, I'm terrible at math, so I'd probably be embarrassed, you know. So right? I mean, it's kind of like all that stuff into one.
Oh, yeah. And it's people pleasing. I would just be embarrassed. I'd be like,
oh, this is good. This is good. I know, you know. So you end up, one of the things, fast forward a little bit, and this is where the meth really takes off, because this podcast is all about addiction, and your story is so interesting. But it is like, the more I deep dove, you're all about recovery, but your addiction takes off when this dude walks in to, what was it, a California pizza kitchen or a California
chicken, yeah.
California chicken, and he's got all the tattoos on, and he's just, you're attracted to this guy.
Yeah, at that point, I was probably 28. My sister had gotten married, and we had been so enmeshed in our lives. Just, I relied on her. She was my everything, and like I didn't exist within myself without her, right? And when she got married and moved to New York, I fell apart. I really think it was a nervous breakdown, although it wasn't technically called that. And when they talk about in the program the solution, I get that, because my solution was drugs. And when I saw this guy at California Chicken, as soon as he walked in, it was like, just, I knew it was trouble. And, fresh, he looked like he was fresh out of prison. And I don't even recall being attracted to those kind of guys before. So it was, even when I think about it now, it's kind of strange. I'm like, it's not, anyway, I was in a really raw place. And I guess whatever. I was, so he gave me his croutons or something. And then I followed him into what was an AA meeting across the street. And that was the first meeting I ever went to in my life.
No kidding. And so what happens after that?
I remember it was a big meeting. I remember, and he walked in there. So I had followed him in. That's what happened. It was right across the street, and I followed him. And I sat in the back and I just sobbed. Like, I knew instinctively that it was a place that was okay to not be okay. I didn't go back for 10 years. It planted the seed, though.
Yeah.
And on the break, we connected while he was, we connected. We didn't connect, but,
Yeah, sure.
We talked.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he at the time was staying at Beit Shuba, it's a Jewish rehab, which I actually spoke at last Wednesday night, and I hadn't been back there since.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that was like 20 years ago, and I went back last week for a new experience, right?
Yeah.
But I rescued him from that rehab, and we put all his stuff in my car, which consisted mainly of like garbage bags full of like, one of the chapters in the book is called Dope and Bald Pussies, because he had all these, video cassettes of it. Was just, that's all he owned, right? Like, like video cassettes of like, porn, specifically, the title I just said. But, and we went to Seaway Motel, which is still there to this day. And fortunately, he went back to prison, because that was the deal, that if he didn't stay at that place, he'd go to prison. And I took his contacts, and I was off and running. So that marked the beginning of the end
of a bottom that lasts like 10 years.
Yeah.
And you're running and gunning, and describe, if you can, your addiction to meth. How did it make you feel? How much did you like it, or did you just do it because you needed to do it?
I did like the ritual. I didn't like it, though. Like, that to me is the terror of this disease, is that right from the beginning, like it wasn't a party. And I remember, like at first it was a summer, and I'm like, I'm in my 20s. A summer of meth doesn't seem, it's not completely, it's okay. And then it's like 6 months, and then it's a year, and then it's 5 years. And so you nailed it when you said that it was a bottom. It was all a bottom. And what it looked like for me was, certainly the lying, the stealing, but the complete, incomprehensible demoralization. Doing things that perpetuated that self-hatred.
Yeah.
And live like, I was a real bathroom girl. I loved that isolation of bathrooms. I know, I'm not trying to brag here, but I know all the good bathrooms, like from, East LA to the beach.
Because you'd stop in there and you'd snort meth, and then you just keep snorting meth in the bathrooms. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It basically became, everything is interesting. At least in my experience.
Yeah. I was a big cocaine guy and a huge Adderall. There was not enough Adderall. I mean, it was just, I would take, you could kill a horse. I was taking so much, and because your tolerance gets up there. And I remember a girl I was dating went overseas, and she sent me this tube of 600 pills of 10 milligram Adderalls. And I was, exactly. I was like,
you had a good picker, Pete.
Yeah, I know, right? People pleasers. I was hearing voices. I wasn't sleeping. I mean, it was just a long run. And then when that's out, you continue to fill that void. And I get what you're saying. There's a moment in your addiction as we get closer to when you got sober where you're dating this guy. The dude, you guys live in Echo Park. The guy doesn't know that you're using meth, but you're using meth all the time. And you have, you really are attracted to plants and gardening, right? So this dude goes to work, right? He's working at a flower shop, and you are in this brush, and I heard you say it, all day. And you mean all day.
All day.
Yeah. What's that experience like? What's happening there?
Well, he would go off to work, and I just remember so suspicious, like being in my little see-through nightgown, like kind of, it's like the angelic white nightgown, and I'm the, and it's like I have no shoes on, no gloves, no, proper attire to garden, and I just I'm going to go back inside to not use. That was my goal every day, don't use. And I just remember picking one branch of bougainvillea. And bougainvilleas, for those who don't know, have thorns. They're a really thorny bush. And I would pick one, and it became so interesting, right? And then I'd be like, oh, that looks better. And then I'd pick another one, and then another one. So it's comparable to picking your face, right? It was just that tunnel of I would just be completely tangled in those bushes all day. And I, with that dry mouth, having to pee, seeing that I'm getting completely torn up, right? And not feeling well after not having slept a few days, somewhat delirium, and of course dehydrated. And remember, this neighbor came. It was the only time someone ever called me out, and she brought me some lemonade. And she said, "Are you using drugs?" And I was so appalled. I was just I just love gardening. How dare you? And, I drank the lemonade.
Well, you needed it.
What's that?
You needed it with the dry. I can feel. I've been there. The dry mouth, and it's you literally need someone to come and keep you alive. Here's what you need. You need to take this in, and that whole. I've heard you tell that story, and I am right there with you. It's one of those things where it's oh my God, where's the time gone? When I started this, I was feeling good. I was high, and I was so into this, and now I'm what's happening? And for me at that point, I was I need a drink. But for you, alcohol wasn't a huge part of the equation at that point.
No, not at that point. No. And and I mean, those kinds of, and gardening, I mean, just these things that became very interesting that I've never gardened since, I have some plants I'm trying to keep alive in my apartment, but that's about it. My disease, it was just what you said, those hours, the time, the days turned into months, into years, and I'm taking apart. I mean, I was a tweaker. And I loved Home Depot, and especially the nail aisle. I was always at Home Depot. I loved it. You know, like the doorknobs were just fascinating. And
you would take apart doorknobs.
Oh, so interesting.
And would you be able to put them back together?
Not really.
There's nothing worse when you start a project like that and you're high and then you look like you're like, oh boy, like where am I going to go with that, right? Somebody's coming home, I have to explain that to them.
Yeah. When my boyfriend at the time in Echo Park came home, I'm like, I know how to do doorknobs. It's so interesting. He's like, well, can you put it together? I'm like, tomorrow, maybe.
How did this, you mentioned this is, or we talked about it, it's like a 10-year bottom. How did you get at it? Like when did you break? When was your last day on meth? And you were like, what happened?
You know, this is the thing, right? And I often hear this from other people too. Like, I don't know why one day was so different than the other, because it was all that terror, all that, again, that gripping demoralization and all the promises to myself. Like when my dealer would go to jail and I'd be like, okay, this time I guess I'm getting sober. Like I would call that sobriety, like sober.
Yeah.
Until as soon as the person called. And it was my bottom, although like I said, it was all a bottom. The last day of meth was in the Bougainvilleas. And I had moved out of where I was living with my boyfriend at the time into this little studio apartment. And it had a backyard, all Bougainvilleas.
Oh, jackpot.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm going to live here. Like, this is paradise. And it was actually, it was a really beautiful place. And that particular day, I was just like many others, you know, in the bushes. And it got to the point where the sun was going down. I dragged myself into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror. And it sounds so corny because it's like, you know, all these years. And then I looked in the mirror and I saw the light and I got sober. And I don't mean it like that at all. However, like I looked in the mirror and, you know, I couldn't look at myself in the eye, right? I mean, I hadn't been able to look at myself in the eye for years. But it looked like I had been attacked in the jungle, like up and down my arms where it's like, were just streaked with blood and, you know, scrapes from the thorns and up and down my legs. And I think I just kind of collapsed on the bathroom floor, the pink tile. I remember the pink tile. And that was the end of meth. And
how did you stop? Cold turkey or? Yeah.
However, what happened, and I think I didn't used to share this too much because sometimes I speak at, you know, CMA meetings or, you know, crystal meth program, 12-step program, especially here in West Hollywood, because there's not that many girls. Or actually, anyway, that's a separate thing.
Yeah.
However, but I think it's important to share because I never considered myself an alcoholic. Thought, well, I'm an addict. And at that point, I was 36. I could never really finish a glass of wine. I mean, except for that high school incident and one wedding I attended in Long Island. Like those were the two times I you know, got drunk. I started to drink. And I even remember my friend saying, wow, this is so cool. You're having a glass of wine with us. And I'm like, isn't it? Like, you're like, yeah, you're so adult. Like, this is really nice. I'm like, it is. I like this. This is nice.
Did you find yourself using alcohol as like a vehicle to integrate more into society, at least for a little bit? That's a no.
I think it was, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
It was, you know, I mean, I guess it helped in a sense. Like I was oddly enough working at a law school at the time. And so it helped me be a little more outgoing.
Were you drinking during the day and stuff?
What's that?
Were you drinking like during the day and stuff and going to work?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So it so quickly became apparent to me, and that was the most frightening part, was I saw that it was just replacing the meth. And that
It's
was
scary to hear you say that, because we just talked about the meth, and that was terrifying and exhausting. And now here you are, and it's like same thing. You know,
same thing.
Same
and
shit,
so that
different
lasted.
day. Same shit, different day, pretty much.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and you start, when you start to, I guess you get to a place where you're seeing a therapist. You've been seeing a therapist the whole time. And the bathroom stuff, I was in CVS yesterday. I thought of you because, yeah, no problem. Yeah.
May you always think of me as CVS.
No. Why, Hannah? For people who don't know, why did I think of you when I was in CVS?
I loved CVS. Like I said, I loved bathrooms. CVS was across the street from my therapist at the time in Beverly Hills. It's still there. And before therapy, it's 12 o'clock. That's a long time. I need a drink before therapy, because therapy is difficult. Take the edge off. And so I'd take a bottle of wine or champagne. I was a big thief. I never liked to pay for anything. So I took that into the CVS bathroom, and I would, drink part of it and stick it in that like trash can and put, paper towels over it and promise myself I wouldn't come back for it later. And I'd go to therapy. And so that CVS bathroom was, to this day, it's so odd to go. I mean, I don't normally go to the restroom in CVS anymore. It's not really necessary. But to this day, going into any restroom,
any public restroom,
it's like I survey it, and I'm like, this is a good one.
Yeah, that stuff, that's the disease. It never leaves us totally. I mean, cliche or what, the obsession is lifted. I don't think about, and it took a little bit, right? I mean, I went to rehab. I lived in a halfway house. I was like institutionalized for a while.
Yeah.
And I had to, there was a lot of urges early on, and I don't have those anymore, but I still have the mind where I'll still see something and be like, well, if I ever walk into a steakhouse bathroom, I'm like, this would be perfect. That's like, I could move in here, and just do cocaine all the time and go back out for a glass of red wine every so often and then just come back. I mean, that's really
a nice steakhouse or
a nice one, yeah, or a shitty one. Anyone where the doors close, and that, like the big wooden doors, like a Capitol Grill. Like, forget about it. I'll pay my rent there. Yeah. If I don't
right there with you.
Yeah.
Right there with you.
So you're going to the CVS, and then the magic per se starts to happen when you walk in and to see your therapist one day.
Yeah, and I had always been in therapy this whole time, over the years, seeking something and some kind of help and something, some kind of anchor, right? And I was specific and especially attracted to, not attracted by me to, not in a physical way, but to, older women therapists that kind of were that mother figure. And this particular therapist really was that. She was just the most kind woman, like just so gentle. It was just, I really loved her. I hadn't been working with her long. And I just remember that day, like I was sitting there and, just this like earthy woman, right? With her, painted toenails and her, sitting like earthy painted toenails don't go together, but just something about her was.
Yeah, well, and it's almost seems for us at that point in time, man or woman, it feels like that is unattainable for us. She's so put together. She's so attractive. She's so inside and out. You're like, I can never be this. Yeah, that's my experience with stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a woman that can sit with herself. That's what I saw. And that is what I had always wanted, right? Always that looked like, wow, if I could be someone that could sit with themselves, that's the dream. And it was unattainable to me, or I thought it was. And she said, Hannah, if you come in like this, if you keep coming like this, we can't do the work. And I heard her. And at that point, I knew I had a problem that was apparent to me. And the next day, I went to my first meeting 2 blocks from where I lived, where that bougainvillea bush backyard was. And I walked into a Wednesday meeting, 12-step program, and I raised my hand, and it was, my life was unmanageable and I was powerless. And my journey began. You know,
How hard was it at the beginning?
it was excruciating. Like those early days were so hard to get my head to the pillow sober was everything, right? Like how does one, or how like for myself, time becomes so different when you're not on meth or drinking. Like time, it's like, and waking up in the morning, first of all, just waking up in the morning, right? Like the paralyzing depression, anxiety, like that terror was just gripping. So it was like every moment was really unbearable. There was no pink cloud, not for a long time. The one thing I did though is I got my head to the pillow sober. You know, I did use Adderall in the first 3 months because I was really worried about gaining weight. People kept saying you're gonna gain like the freshman 10, the sobriety 10, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm like, no fucking way.
Yeah.
No. And plus, I still, you know, at that point, I had 2 sugar daddies, a boyfriend and a lover, and I'm like, they're not gonna want like some girl with, and you know. Well, anyway, I need, you know.
But that's an interesting component too, because you know, time takes time. Like, whatever about, you know, those relationships is making you feel some kind of way. When you're sober, eventually for you, that just doesn't work anymore. But that's sobriety for you. Your life, you have to, you know, people say, you know, all you have to do is change everything. But like, it's damn near impossible to change everything overnight. And so this journey for you involves, you know, you go in to the rooms with 2 sugar daddies, and you start to kind of thaw out and clear up. And what are the steps you go through, not only to, you know, remove that kind of stuff from your life, but what are you doing to change? Because if you're at all like me, the beginning is, like you said, every moment is excruciating. You know, and I did find a lot of hope and good energy in meetings, and that made me feel good. And so I was like, okay, this is the only other thing that can make me feel good. And I'd finally started to wrap my mind around that this other stuff was killing me. And I felt like I had a couple more tricks left up my sleeve as a human being, you know, to actually do the right thing and help people with like God-given talents. You know, how did you manage all that time early on?
I mean, so for you, it was excruciating too.
Yeah, early on for sure, because it was everything. I've done it for 20 years, in the last 10 years, all the time. And the only thing that could really, for me, treatment was the only thing that worked. It was the first time I tried. I'd been in and out of AA for it took me 10 years to get 1 year, right? So I go to treatment, and there's a wall between me and everything else. And that worked, you know, and I started to realize the more I bought into the program and to just saying what was really going on with me, telling the truth. And that felt good, you know, and I saw people go before me where it worked for them. And I was like, I got to do this. And I really was, you know, anything, it was so fleeting. I don't know if it was like this for you, but it was so me. You mentioned that first meeting you went to, there were 6 people there, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine, these are 6 people. Like, what if they all had some shit come up that night? You know, what if you walk in and nobody's there? I mean, now it's bigger than us in a sense where you probably were ready, but that just shows how fleeting sobriety is. Like, on the wrong day, if the wrong thing happens, I'm not here sitting here talking to you. I'm dead or I'm in prison.
Yeah, that's right. That is, and those 6 people, I still have their cards. They gave me their cards that day, or the people that gave me their cards. They're right behind me in the kitchen drawer. And I never called any of them, but it's a testament to the importance of reaching out, right? And handing someone your number and being there, being the hand, whether or not they call you, because those cards gave me hope. And I came home and I looked at it, and I remember looking at this one girl, and she had red hair and said actress. And I'm like, that's an alcoholic, and I can call her. I didn't, but it gave me something, you know. And I brought one of those cards to my a wedding in that first month I was sober in Hawaii, and I didn't drink. I did use Adderall because I didn't want to eat the cake, but and I did, you know. I ended up telling my sponsor, and that didn't go well. So I got a new sponsor.
How were you? Yeah, let me get a new sponsor, right? How were you with, like, you know, obviously sex, guys were a big part of your addiction and that murky past. How were you able to transition into dating again? And I mean, that's for me, that was so tough because alcohol, you know, made me feel like I felt less than, you know, just from the beginning of the day till the end of the day. When it came to, there was things I was confident about in my life, but it certainly wasn't relationships with women. And so alcohol was my conduit to that. And so when I got sober, man, there was a lot of work to be done. You know, how did you get through all that and work through that?
Wow. Well, one, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, the dating and the love stuff. One, I immediately stopped seeing the lover. Like, I knew I just couldn't, and that was incredibly hard, but it equaled a drink to me. And I was serious enough about my sobriety, like I wanted it more than anything. And I had that gift that I talk about, the gift of desperation. You know, I was 39 years old, and I saw a glimmer of hope within that terror. And that particular person, I just knew it equaled a drink. And that was really tough because that person kept contacting, like it was, but I just, you know.
Were you in love with this person? And
yeah,
that shows how high you said on some level, but that shows how high the stakes are.
We were together for 2 years.
Yeah. And when you're really in it, I mean, you start to do things that you do not want to do. And then you start to feel better.
Yeah.
As hard as that shit is, it's like, oh, wow. Like, I followed suggestions. I put my sobriety first, and here I am. Maybe it's 6 months, you know, or a year, but it's like, I'm so much better for having made those hard decisions.
Yeah. And just sit on my hands and even have a sponsor when it came time to amends that. Maybe it was time to make amends to him. And she even said, let's take a look at that. And I said, absolutely not. It would be for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I drew the line at that. I was like, I told my sponsor, I could use that as an excuse and I'd be right back in.
Yeah, you're very important because you can tell other people that you sponsor and that come behind you that, hey, look, here's what I did. And that's a huge thing about sobriety. It's like and maybe the woman who's sponsoring the girl who's having the same experience, you know, your friend, let's say, is sponsoring this particular person. It's like, well, I don't know, but Hannah had a similar experience. Go talk to her. That's a beautiful thing about AA. Like, if you ask me about what you're going through, it's like, I may not have the answer, but I've been here long enough where I'm sure I know somebody, or directly, or somebody knows somebody that you can talk to that's been there.
Yeah. That is like what it talks about, where we don't have to do anything alone, not anything. Like, I remember when I had a sponsee, I still have one. She's still with me 8 years later. And, you know, it was the time for her to do her fifth step. And she was, you know, apprehensive about sharing certain things with me. And I just remember saying, listen, you know, it was about the sex industry. And I said, you're talking to someone that came in, and my best thinking right before I got sober was to place an ad on Craigslist with my sister and be dominatrix foot fetish sisters. Like, I'm not going to judge you for some, like.
Yeah, we don't judge here. Yeah.
Like, no, don't worry about it.
Yeah. That's so true, though. It's one of the only places. You said when you went to that first meeting following in that guy who was trouble, you said you knew there was a place to go where it was okay to feel not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And how amazing is that, right? Like, like tonight I have my home group, and it's been a rough time. I've been going through it lately, and I get to share where I'm out there, right? And because other people do that, I know where to go for people, exactly what you said, that have it's an experience, whether it's an aging parent or these things that are really huge or small, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I remember the first time like I went to get my oil changed. It's like a huge thing. Like I remember calling someone and the person's like, okay, text me when you're there and we'll bookend it. I'm like, okay. And I pulled in and I said, I'm here. And he's like, good job, Hannah. It's Jiffy Lube. And then like 30 minutes later, I'm like, I'm home. I didn't do it. He's like, that's okay. We'll try again.
Yeah, but that's what people don't understand that, but we do. I mean, it's, and those are things. I have a buddy who got sober when he was like 19, and he literally called a sponsor up once because his parents were like, you need to take the trash out. He's like, I don't know if that's God's will. I'm going to call my sponsor. And his parents were like, dude, take out the trash. But he literally called a sponsor. I mean, that's kind of, and you know what? The success rate for people like that is pretty high as far as, are you willing to go to any lengths?
Yeah. That is exactly it. Like, are you willing to go to any lengths? And I feel very blessed that I've been carried through this whole time. And I know not everyone is. And I've also, like, I recognize that I've had the willingness. And I think it continues to come back to that gift of desperation and knowing the alternative and seeing, like you said, something in that something out there that I'm like, oh, it may be possible.
Yes.
Because my thinking got me here. And I think in terms of like the dating and the sex and well, not sex, we didn't say sex, but
you can go ahead. I mean, it's all kind of part of that same intimidating monster that can honestly sometimes can keep you drunk or keep you using, because it's like, how am I going to do that without this?
That was really scary to me, especially having followed someone into the program. So I ended up going mainly to gay meetings when I first got sober, and actually to this day, because they ended up being my core people, right? And I just felt safe there. Like I wasn't going to, follow the wrong guy or whatever. And so when I got sober, that lover was over, and I had two sugar daddies, and I knew I couldn't sleep with them if I wasn't drinking. So it was a choice of, is it taking me closer to a drink or farther away? And it was just so clear. I'm like, there's no way without some champagne I can sleep with this person. And then so I ended it with one of the men. And then the other one, we continued to see each other for a year, but we only ever had sex once when I was drunk, and then never sex again. And he was an unusual man. But we would go to dinner, and he gave me money every month, and he'd take me to Trader Joe's, and I got a sober job, is what they said to do. And after a year of seeing him, no physical stuff, he was a very nice man, really. Like, we go to plays together, and it was very strange. Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
I'm like, and when you have a minimum wage job, or at least for me, and I quit my job at the law school, and not the one sugar daddy and then this other sugar daddy, because we weren't having sex. I mean, it was, it was, when I'm talking like $200 a month. Yeah. But that was a lot, like to supplement like my dog store job and bringing me to Trader Joe's. But it did come. There was a Christmas. I was about a year sober, and he sat me down and he said, "I'm in love with you, and I want you to move in with me. I'll buy you a car." Because at that point I had like half a car. It was smashed in. And I'm probably similar in Texas. Like in LA, you just don't drive half a car.
Yeah.
No.
When you've got to have a car out there.
You got to have a car. And also, you got to look like you have something going on. I'd park it like 2 blocks from the gym and I'd walk. Like, ooh. And he said, and I'll pay for you to go back to school and get your MFA. And it was, I had to make that choice then. And I got honest. I said, I don't have those feelings about you. And that ended. And that's really, really when the journey began in a whole other way, because the financial fear was so gripping. And how am I going to pay the rent? And people kept saying, like, just keep coming back. It's going to be okay. And I was carried. And I remember, and I've had other women in that industry reach out to me, and there's like a real turning point. I mean, for me, that was a real turning point of leaning in or not. Because he would contact me and say, how are you doing? I just want to send you some rent money. And that's kind of the way he was. He would drive all the way over from Sherman Oaks and like give $1,000. And he wouldn't even see me. He would just leave it on the
And you started to say no to this?
Yeah. And he said, are you okay? Do you have rent? And like, I didn't have rent and I wasn't okay, or I didn't feel I was okay. And I said, yes, I'm doing well. Thank you. And the people in the program carried me and said, you're gonna be okay. And then someone would call for me to take care of their dog. And that would be like $100 extra. Or, get another job, 3 jobs, like whatever it took.
When did you start to write again? Or to write, period?
Yeah, that took time. I think I was maybe a year, maybe 2, but I actually think it was a year. I had finally got a sponsor because my picker was really off that first year. Meaning I didn't know a sponsor should have a sponsor.
Yeah.
Right? Like or at least for me coming in, it was just like, what are these words? What are you guys talking about? Like, but I kept coming back. And with I'm just blanking. Oh, with the writing. Yeah, I asked my sponsor, it was something I was talking to my sponsor about, and she said, start with 5 minutes a day. And so I began, 5 minutes a day, and it wasn't with no intention of writing a book or anything like that. And I began, and one of the things is, I think with growing, I had done ballet growing up, and the discipline of, like, I had that discipline of once I start something, and also that alcoholic nature of like, once I start, like, no, like I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to write every day, no matter
that's it. Yeah,
what.
And that's your regimen. Yeah, you can't miss that, or else you'll go nuts.
Yeah. So it was like, no matter what, I wrote every single day for 2 years. And that's when I began that. And it was, the actual book was a very, very long process.
A couple more things and I'll let you out of here. Where did you find the courage to write about such, incredibly vulnerable stuff? Yeah.
Well, I think one, being so used to saying it in 12-step meetings, I didn't find that particularly hard to talk about what was going on. And that is a testament to the tolerance and love in the program. Like I would come in and, to the meeting and be like, I'm going to go see my, Iranian sugar daddy tonight. And, and have a little dress on with a bow, and
yes,
the guys,
person,
be like,
yeah.
Guys would be like, girl, just keep coming back. She looks fabulous. And it was one thing I did. I just shared all the time, like, whatever was going on. And so when I was writing the courage, I think that was this is the fact of what we do here, right? We share. share from the heart and share what's really going on. And I think the hardest part was knowing that my parents would read it, or at least my mother. But beyond that, writing what's really going on. Like I had already been publishing in a recovery magazine, or a thing called the Fix at the time. So I was already sharing parts of my story. And I remember they said, "Do you want to put anonymous on this?" And I said, "No."
Wow,
no, I don't.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you start to write, and then you continue to develop your journey. Part of your journey now includes you teach prisoners to write.
Yeah, actually, that came from my financial amends. I had a really long amends.
Yeah, you're like me. You like to steal shit. You like to take stuff that wasn't yours.
Right?
I always say part of my story is, steal your shit, help you look for it. That's where I was. I mean, I spent a lot of time helping people try to find stuff that I knew they were never going to find.
You don't look the part.
Oh,
I mean, that's
well, trust me.
us,
Yeah,
right?
neither do you. Yeah.
We're the ones who really got to be careful.
Yeah, exactly.
Really careful. Yeah. I mean, I had been stealing since I was 6, so that list was really, really long. And it came to a point in the financial amends where my sponsor, it was right towards the end of the financial amends, and she said, "I think you've done enough of these at this point. The point is that with this last financial amends, I think it's time to give back in a different way, not necessarily financial." So I started praying about it, and I went to Angels on Wheels, or one of those places to serve food and bring food to. I'm not much in the kitchen, so that didn't. I was like, praying to my, something bigger than myself, like put me where I can be of maximum service. And the same thing with the book. And right now, like you called right when I was praying that day, like, show me what's the next step? Where do you want me to be? Right. And then I got your outreach, and I was like, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank
right?
you.
And,
yeah. I mean, what you're doing is unbelievable. And I think I think for any of us to have any kind of a platform and to share our experience, strength, and hope with people on any kind of stage or platform is huge, because I know when I was going through it, I looked to people that could carry a message that were out there. And the fact that you're doing it and people can see you and understand, like you said, I love your story about the card with this is an actress and she's sober. You didn't call her. She said, "What's up?" She gave you a card. I mean, sometimes that's all it takes to kind of just continue to keep us sober for that day.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I can't count the times I'd run into someone in the program and they'd be like, like at the gym, and my eyes would be watering, and they would just kind of pat me, like not pat me on the shoulder. That sounds.
But they understand. They know what's going on. All right, what's the last thing? What do you say to somebody that's in and out of the room and in and out of the rooms, and they just can't get it, and they ask you, like, what do I do?
I mean, the one thing I did is I kept coming back. And actually, I was asked this yesterday, and I felt a little strange about saying it, because I know people are like, well, you do the steps, do this and do that, but without my people holding my hand, without the fellowship, without like having a circle, like I have nothing, right? It's through these people getting to hear their stories, having that community, like today, like I want to be in the middle because I love the people surrounding me. So I would say, keep coming back, head to pillow sober, like hold on, because it gets better. And people kept telling me that it would. And I'm like, and also, like, you just never know. Like, it was someone who had 7 days. So anyone coming back, like, it was the person that had 7 days that helped me get to 4 days, not anyone else. Right. So the power, the strength that an actual newcomer also has to carry the message. It was all I could hear.
Did that newcomer come up to you or say something, or?
What's that?
Did the person with 7 days say something to you when you had 4 days, or?
Yeah, I was 3 days, and I just remember crying, just like I don't know how I'm gonna, like, it was a 6 o'clock meeting. I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it through the night. I just didn't, and after the meeting, this young man came up to me, and he had 7 days, and he gave me a hug, and he said, you can do it. You can do it. And I got to 4 days. And it was that simple, but not so simple thing, right? It wasn't like, go home and read the book. No, it was that hug. It was that person saying, you can do it. And I'm well aware that not everyone comes back. And what would you say to someone?
Man, I've never had anybody turn it around on me like that. You gotta be, and it's almost hard for me to say this to somebody because I'm a people pleaser. But you got to go to any lengths. That's how I got sober. I mean, I didn't want to go to treatment. I went to treatment. I didn't want to go to a recovery house. I went to a recovery house. I didn't want to live with another sober dude in North Jersey for another 2 years. I did that. You know what I mean? I didn't want to go. I did all this shit that I didn't want to do. And I have access to an incredible life today. Like you, some days I'm going through it and it sucks, but for the most part, things were pretty awesome. And it's nowhere near what it was before when I was doing whatever I wanted all the time. Like, your best thinking got you. That's where my best thinking got me, Yeah. That willing to go to any lengths, that is it. That is really it. There's so many examples of that where it's like, and to this day, like, I met with my sponsor the other night, and I told her, I said, I don't want to do that. Some directions she gave me. And I'm like, and I'm trying to bargain with her. I said, can I just give that money to a homeless person instead? Like, that just seems so much more, and she's like, no. And I said, that's ridiculous. Like, You told her, yeah, exactly.
I still haven't done it, but I will, because it's in my head.
I got a bunch of those on the wall, or stick on snow on the roof. All right, look, I'm going to let you get back to your life. I can't thank you enough. The book is called Strip. I'll put it in the show notes. You're on Facebook, and I know you just cranked up your Instagram, so we'll drop that in there too. I heard you mention that to somebody.
Pete, thank you so much. Thank you for all you bring.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I like your whole setup here. For people who can't see it, it's tight.
We got the plants, I knew you'd like that.
Are they real?
Yeah, no. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Anna. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.